Hello, welcome to Storytelling the Heroine's Journey. I'm Kate Farrell, your host, and today I'm excited to welcome and interview Lee Ann Prescott, who will tell us some of her amazing life story as a modern day heroine. Lee Ann and I both live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we both are exploring the archetypes of the feminine quest, how they can apply and perhaps reframe our lives to give them a little more meaning. Welcome, Lee Ann. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's a real pleasure to come here.
Great. So I wonder, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, the backstory, and your own challenging journey? And even how did it become heroic? I mean, what are some of the heroic aspects of it?
Well, I'm a writer professionally. I work in a corporate setting. I am a content marketer, and I am 51 years old. So I was raised in the 1970s and 1980s in a very alternative household. I grew up not knowing who my father was. My mother hooked up with a guy when I was about 5 or 6, and you would call him a hippie. And we set off traveling around the country, living in various RVs, and we built a house on our own, sort of like the Back to the Land movement. And also I did homeschool for every other year. And I think I was exposed to a lot of different things growing up. And then I got a scholarship to college and moved to San Francisco and entered the corporate world.
That's just such an amazing ending to that journey. I can hardly believe that. But I think as you were talking about all the different moves and how you were going to schools on every other year, it seems to me that you became very resilient and were curious, observing, and were able to step back enough from your environment to succeed in order to get a scholarship. So to me, in that way, it sounds pretty heroic. So as you're thinking about yourself and how you not only survived but thrived in a very challenging childhood environment, how does, as we were working together in a class with the myth of Psyche and Eros as one of the bases for discussion, were you at all thinking about some of the challenges facing you now as comparable to the feminine quest, Psyche's need to face impossible tasks to survive?
Yeah, when I started, it was immediately apparent to me when I took, so our assignment in the class, you gave a lot of lecture and told the story in the first class. And when I came home, I knew exactly what I needed to write, and it was a story of money. And that's been one of the biggest struggles in my life. And I feel that, the financial system is a patriarchal system, and that to succeed in what it takes to succeed in it are those masculine qualities to a large extent. And so what I wanted to do was really kind of dive into that story of money. And actually, as preparation for writing the piece that I'm going to read to you today, I spent probably about 3 hours really diving into all the numbers and looking at how much interest I've paid, what my income has been over the years, and how that's been related to kind of my own heroine's journey.
Right. That is so analytic. It sounds to me like it's one of the ways to quantify the challenges that women face. And it's been the case, certainly in my generation, not even having access to financial management, that we in my generation, it wasn't until the 70s that we could even open a credit card, our bank account, or take out a loan or buy a car in our own name. We had to have a man with us and open it in his name. So this is very new. It's something that is a new challenge. And as you were talking about it, you know, because I'm the storyteller and I know the Psyche myth, I wonder if it related more specifically to her first task of sorting the seeds. Do you see that?
Yeah, I was definitely sorting the seeds when I was digging around in all the spreadsheets, but I had a career as a research analyst as well. So I know my way around numbers, and I had never really, I do keep track of things, but I had never really dived into it in that much detail.
Right.
And then, you know, wanting to put my storytelling skills around it was
That,
that was definitely sorting the seeds.
yeah. Well, I can't hardly wait to hear it. So I wanted to mention too that on this YouTube channel, episode 5 does present segments of the myth Psyche and Eros, and I then tell a personal story, but it relates to the second task of Psyche, which was to gather the golden fleece from the very fierce rams. So if anyone is interested, check out the episode 5. It'll give you a little taste of the myth itself, and also how I was able to translate it into something I needed to learn, which was male assertiveness and grab that golden fleece. So, and finally then, as you were writing your piece and digging deep and retelling the story of money, what inspired you to even do this? What was your inspiration to write this particular piece?
Because it's a story I haven't told before and nobody knows it. And I felt like it was time to come out with it.
Great.
And sometimes, you know, the thing you don't say is the thing you need to say the most. And that's where I felt that it's the one piece. I mean, I think a lot of the pieces around that I was ashamed to tell, like my father's drug addiction, I'm kind of through that. And that was a big step for me in writing my memoir, and growing up in a household where drugs were being used all the time, I think was very difficult to talk about, and how that's affected me from money perspective. I think it's just carried on.
That's great. And I also think that there's so much shame around money in our culture that we don't want to talk about it, because success and who we are valued as a person almost relates directly to how much money we have. And so that's part of what we keep hidden away. So it's great that you are
and I think a lot of people blame you for not knowing. And how can you know something you don't know and nobody's ever told you, and you don't have any support for, you know, you don't have any examples in your life, people who did manage money well.
No, I agree with you completely. It's sort of that sense that women actually have to self-teach, self-monitor, because there was no model. Women were expected to be frivolous shoppers. Women were expected to not know how to manage money, at least in my generation. And that has been the cultural norm for a long time. So there was no one to ask. And and I was very badly trained as a child.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God, what a success to be able to quantify, to crunch the numbers, to do this. It's a real feat, and I'm very excited to hear your story. So now I wonder, I hope that you can share the story which you've called Escape from Nowhere with us.
Yeah. So the essay I'm going to read is called Just the Facts. And so it was the essay that I wrote for your class. So this is my money story. In 2008, at the age of 36, I had reached the pinnacle of my career. I was earning more than ever. I reported directly to the CEO. I had appeared on local television to discuss a research project I had just published. I paid off my credit cards and made my last car payment. I was miserable. One day, a PR disaster ensued. To cope, as soon as it was over, I booked a kayaking trip to Mexico. A few months later, I reached peak burnout and kicked a cubicle wall in a fit of frustration about a project I had stayed to complete. The wall won, and my foot was broken. I didn't know who I was anymore, and I needed time to find out. A year later, I was happier with my life, writing, going to meditation groups, and swimming on a master's team. I was also buying groceries on my credit cards. I had to give up the little rented house I could no longer afford and move in with a roommate. Soon, a plan emerged. I would go to grad school to get an M.F.A. in writing, to write my life story, the story my mother had been telling me to write since we went on the road when I was in 3rd grade and began my homeschool years. I already knew the title, Escape from Nowhere. We had lived nowhere for years, in a VW bus, a pop-up camper, a slide-in pickup camper, in an 18-foot 1963 trailer camper, in a house you had to go outside in the winter to use the middle of the night. I had lived nowhere, and I had escaped by becoming valedictorian and getting a scholarship to Middlebury College. I had escaped New England by moving to San Francisco at the age of 21. The years I spent in grad school writing were years I spent knowing myself, unpacking who I was and who I wasn't. They were also years I got into debt. $73,350 in federal student loans, to be exact, plus $15,000 on a private loan and another $19,000 in credit card debt. Upon graduating, I was faced with the reality of making a living when everything I had done to make a living before no longer interested me. My freelance business moved in fits and starts. I was more interested in the very part-time, low-paying work I did for a spiritual teacher than writing about search engine marketing. For 12 years after quitting my job, my average income was 45% of what I had made in my best year of full-time work. I was also more than $20,000 behind on my taxes. To manage all the payments, I declared Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which put the student loans on pause while I caught up on the taxes. In the meantime, I found contract work while the interest grew on my student loans. I was stuck writing for CEOs and influencers while having no voice of my own, no book of my own, simply because it was all that I knew how to do to pay for the advanced education that taught me to know myself, the self that was constantly convincing herself of the value of my paid work because it no longer held personal value. In 2022, 9 years after receiving my graduate, another revision of Escape from Nowhere, I found myself in another nowhere. I was 50 years old with no retirement savings, no boyfriend or husband, a failing 18-year-old car, and a looming recession with waves of tech layoffs beginning. I decided it was time to apply for a full-time job and gone. I bought a new car just before my old one died and started socking away money into savings to prepare for the restart of student loan payments. I got a bonus at work and paid off the $15,000 private loan. All in all, I paid Navient $32,700 $754 in total due to capitalized interest during times of hardship forbearance. My capitalized interest on the federal loans is now $37,464.50. If I meet my goal of paying off the federal loans by 2031, the year I turn 60, I will have given the federal government $68,630 for the privilege of taking out $73,350 in loans to write my book. That's almost a 200% return on investment for the federal government. 17% of my current take-home pay goes to student loan payments, and 11% goes to retirement. There is no guarantee that my book will find a publisher or the art projects I have done since then will ever earn me money. I continue to live a double life, a corporate marketer by day and a creative writer and spiritual seeker by night. I have never had a facial, an eyebrow treatment, a manicure, a pedicure, or paid someone to dye my hair. Instead, I paid the membership fee to join the Writer's Grotto in San Francisco, where I'm finding the inspiration and help I need to find a publisher for my book. The story is not yet complete. The happy ending is yet to come. I hold in my vision the day of making that last loan payment and the day of my book launch party. I will be older then, and I will perhaps be wiser.
Thank you so much. That's such a heart-crushing story in so many ways. And, you know, it seems the theme that you began with, escape from nowhere, is continuing with the idea of how do you get out from under this kind of a cloud that makes no sense. It's almost like a nowhere sense. No, it's a nonsense. It's a tale that doesn't make sense.
Capitalized interest makes no sense.
That's right. Absolutely.
I will just say that capitalizing interest makes no sense.
It doesn't. And
because it's punishing you for being in a hardship.
Right. And right. And I agree with you. I think it's usurious. I think it's a terrible mistake. I think it's definitely backwards in terms of how to invest in our citizens, in college graduates, in the potential of our community. And that it and I wonder if you think that it really affects female graduates more than the male graduates, and how that happened.
Well, I think it does, because women, first of all, right now, 60% of college attendees are female. And more women are opting into college because it's a way of trying to get their earnings on par with men. And because, as we know, women earn somewhere between 70-75% of what men earn, but that is because most low-paying jobs are held by women.
That's right.
So I think women have to make different choices. One, when their marriage prospects are men who don't, if 60% of, there's fewer educated men, like there's an imbalance there of the number of educated men and educated women to pair up
right
in relationship. And then if the woman's the larger earner, she's also paying off her student loans, and that's going to affect her choice whether or not to have a family. And we're in a time when more women are deciding not to get married, two, not to have children.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to affect our population long term, just simply because of the cost.
Right. But even so, if a female grad, a woman started out, right off after graduation, whether it's BA or master's, begins to develop her career, she still begins with a handicap, because she's not going to be making as much money as the male who seems to not only, Well, let's go back to the whole idea.
And it's not like women pay less for their a college education than men, but they earn less when they get out.
They earn less. And then if they, as we know, if a woman does get married and decides to have a child, then that just adds to the loan, the cycle of the loan. When can it be, when is it going to pause? When is it going to start up again? So women have the vulnerability of being the child bearer as well as the lower income earner. And so it definitely affects women much more, or considerably more than a male. And just going back to the other idea about what you mentioned is there's no role model for how to manage money. Generally speaking, not you in particular, Lee Ann, because you're very exceptionally skilled.
Well, I learned my lessons the hard way. I went through bankruptcy.
Right. But that's a hard way to learn it. But even so, I think men, and I can only say this from my own experience, I'm not a statistician on this, but men have a better overall sense of how to manage money because they've been trained to do it. Similarly, they have had experience in how to drive cars or how to take care of the mechanics of a car. It all came with a cultural role of being the provider, of being the man who was going to manage, the household. So that we're coming from a disadvantage, not only in making less money, but not knowing how to manage money as well.
It depends. I mean, my dad taught me about money, but everything he did was in cash. So he taught me how to do things. He taught me how to negotiate because he was a salesman. I can negotiate, and I know I get that from him because I watched him negotiate.
Right. So a lot of what we get as daughters comes directly from our father, particularly if, we had a close relationship. But I think there is a deficit in how women think about themselves still in managing money and being the provider for themselves, because we were taught to get married so that we would have.
I think it speaks to a larger issue, and I think this is relevant to Psyche, is because when I really thought about the myths as you taught in Psyche in the class, was all of the tasks, there were not things that she wanted to do, right? And I felt like all my life, like the things that succeeding in the corporate world is a system that's built by men for men, and women are trying to succeed in it. So they're like these tasks that are given to them that they think they have to do, maybe aren't what they really want. Like, I don't think Psyche had a good time doing all those, really wanted to like, sort seeds and collect fleece and like get the water, I mean, it wasn't like she was doing what she wanted. And I think women aren't really taught that they can have a world that they want, because they're always trying to succeed in this.
Right.
In this.
That's right. I agree.
And even though it was Aphrodite that was giving her the tasks, it's still this kind of like overlord telling you what to do all the time.
Right. And even if you need a portion of that in your overall self-development, it certainly doesn't feel like that in 2023 San Francisco. It feels like you need more. You need to almost have 60% of what Psyche was learning through those tasks, rather than just a modicum amount to be a balanced personality. So how do you see any of this resolved? How do you see a way that Psyche was able to resolve it in her challenges? And does that relate in any way to how you see you resolving the issue of paying off the student loans?
Well, I mean, I thought a lot about the sort of the last set of tasks that Psyche had to go to the underworld. And getting her message from the tower, I think, but she got kind of like the instructions along the way, like all at once, and then went on her journey. Whereas I think for us, we're kind of like making it up as we go along. So, so we have to like cross the bridges when, like pay the ferryman when the time comes, like pay someone to help us. Like, I've certainly paid for therapy. I've
Right. And learn.
for different advice at different times. And, I think having a corporate job is kind of feeding the three-headed dog,
It is. It is. There's very, very little way.
It just eats all my time and energy, and it's not really, and it's kind of like, well, I need to get to where I want to go. And in the meantime, I got to feed this three-headed dog with my time.
And then finally, the whole idea of beauty from Persephone, who seems to have some kind of, according to her stories, has a real affinity for the dark side of people, compassion, sense of the cycle of life and death, this sort of embodied wisdom of the feminine. And yet you bring it back, and does that really resolve what you need to do in the world above?
I think it does, because I think that I know that in the work that I'm doing now, that my wisdom plays a very large role, because I am a writer and that I have a voice for my company, and I'm setting that up with heart, and I'm trying to lead, like I see the Persephone's beauty as kind of like a spiritual heart and wisdom, because I've never really focused on beauty as like a thing that I need to like seek out. Like I've always been more of a collector of knowledge and experience and wisdom. And as a writer, I think that I've been following a little bit of the Modern Elder Academy, and Chip Conley talks a lot about having the spiritual kind of the wisdom, the elder wisdom as you are in your 50s and older,
Right.
and how that plays into the corporate world. And I think in particular, it's really reminding people of the heart, that we're all in business together. We're people in business together. And I work in the human resources space, so there is a lot of that energy. And I did make a transition. I was working in the online advertising space for quite some time, which to me felt empty and vacuous, and I had no sense of purpose about it. But because now I work in particularly hiring, in recruiting, and then also more generally human resources,
Right.
that those people are trying to make a better world for their employees.
That's right. Oh, that sounds really like a very significant shift in your work, and also in what you're valuing. And so really, truly appreciate your sharing that with us. It gives us a glimmer of the way forward. And I'm very appreciative that you spent some time with Psyche's myth to show a parallel way of interpreting your own experiences.
And there are men, kind of Eros saves her at the end, and there are men who are kind of leading this movement and helping us along, I think. But it's a complex situation. And as far as the student loans go, that situation has to be fixed somehow. They need to do away with capitalized interest, provide a way for us to pay off our loans and not pay taxes on the money first.
That's
so that
right.
The government isn't double dipping, because I don't get to pay off my loans. I pay that on post-tax income.
Right.
So there are multiple ways that the situation can be kind of resolved, even without having to forgive everyone's loans. Like, let's just forgive the capitalized interest.
I agree. So I think that those are practical ways, political ways to be informed and to work with in our community and within the political system that we have. I think there's movement there on a national basis. So I just need more people on board who can vote in those, vote that way. So I want to, is there anything else you wanted to share about Escape from Nowhere, where you are today? Do you feel like you're still nowhere, or do you feel like you're coming in?
I feel like this, that, well, for one, I feel like this interview is putting me somewhere. So I'm really grateful to you, Kate, for giving me this opportunity to read this and share this story, because I think it's everywhere that people are being empowered to tell their stories is and is important, because we're all in this together. You know, this isn't just me, this isn't just my story.
Right.
And I know I'm not alone in this situation of being a 50 something saddled with student loan debt, and worried about my retirement in 15 years, where I don't know. I'll you know, the projections of my retirement income right now would have me in the very low income category in my area in Marin County. So I would not be, with my retirement income, I would not be able to afford the apartment that I live in now. I would have to move into subsidized housing.
So, but
and I hope that I'm not alone, and then I
right.
hope that I'm with a partner who maybe, you know, but I can't guarantee that.
But I hear what you're saying. Telling this story in such shocking detail, being willing to bear, you know, your budget and, you know, all of those things that people tend to hide away is a great release. And it puts you somewhere, it puts you out here, and it helps us understand we're not alone. And as you said, as you move along, you know, in the underworld, you'll find a way. And it's partly knowing that you will find a way. That is,
yeah, and you get, you know, it's not, I didn't get the instructions 15 years ago, but you know, at every turn, you know, if something opens up, and then you do the, you know, you take one step at a time. And I think that's more like how life works.
It does. And with this understanding, there is sort of this tower, knowing is sort of a general sense of hope, and that you will find the allies, that you will find the little ants and whatever, someone will talk to you, you'll get the information, it will work out. And that's a story of the old tales, that they do work out, and it depends on your inner strength, beauty, heart, and spirit. So thank you again for joining us on Storytelling the Heroine's Journey. I think it's a terrific episode. It has so much in it, practically the whole history of modern women at this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you.
So for everyone, please find out more about Lee Ann in the description, with the episode, in the links below, and also in the comments section. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like our episode, and leave comments. More episodes are coming soon.